All right, here we are. As for today's reading, we are reading from To Ride, Shoot Straight, and Speak the Truth by Jeff Cooper, no relation. Combat is an unusual experience for most of us, but then emergencies of any kind always are. However, combat does occur, and any fully educated person knows this and prepares for it. Despite what we may hear, combat is not characteristic of any particular occupation or situation. It may come to a policeman, but it may just as probably come to a barber, a broker, or a biologist. Accepting this is the first step in physical security. No one can solve any problem of which he is not aware. And that is, like I said, it's from To Ride, Shoot Straight, and Speak the Truth by Jeff Cooper, another book worth being in the library. So, as usual, I'd like the guest to introduce yourself. Fire
Sure.
away.
Yeah. Chris Blau. I do a couple different things within the gun industry. I have a YouTube channel called 1911 Syndicate. I also work for a suppressor company called CGS Suppressors, traveling around the country, slinging suppressors and the gift of silence for them. And then I'm also a real estate agent. So got a couple things going on.
Yeah, I mean, eventually someone is going to probably just jump the shark and start using Simon and Garfunkel for the sound of silence in some of their stuff. And
Yeah.
I don't know whether I'm here for it or I'm like, that's going to be a rough start.
Right. If
Maybe
it's done properly.
yeah, it has to be done properly. So, well, that being the case, before we dive deeper into the show, we are doing a pre-order right now for our subdued shirts as well as for our new version, which is the inverted one, which is going to be black text on white shirts. And if the subdued version we dropped earlier, we had put them out in December, but they're back because of, quite frankly, they're one of my favorite designs. Just the
Yeah.
kind of the hat tip to night vision. But this time we've decided to do a giveaway as well. And there's a company that I've worked with in the past. It's called Tour Knives. I'm wearing one of their shirts. I like their stuff. I also like the people that I've just had good reactions, interactions, conversations with the people at the company, and so I've decided that having a knife is probably a good thing, and having a good kit knife has always been an advantage. And us in gun culture kind of like to bake our identity into certain
Sure.
items, and sometimes, and I think that comes out a little extra in the knives. So one of the things that I've been thinking about lately is knives that go on your belt. And let's just say you have a shooting belt, should typically be more of the utility variety, whereas knives that go on the plate carrier are a little bit more pointy, pokey, and specifically for getting people off, kind of a little bit more directed in that sense. And that being the case, I kind of have two examples here, and I'm not sure these may not be the exact ones we're giving away, but for example, Tour kind of covers both. They've got the mullet, which I've the name being. I've really enjoyed this one. It's been on my belt for a while. My all-time favorite knife actually does come from Tour, and that's their Vandal, which they recently brought back. But the mullet has been a fantastic belt knife, with a glass breaker in the handle and just a very useful, comfortable curve for, again, that kind of utility. But I also have one of their Cryptias here, which it's still in the case, but that's an example of something that I'd think I'd want that
Nice.
on a plate carrier, because I've been thinking about it more and more lately. A plate carrier should be a little bit more daggerly thin and knife like, because
Yeah.
it doesn't really have any utility other than the potentiality of violence. And so
Yeah.
as a result, it's just a fun thought piece. But I also wanted to um, participate more in gun culture here and know that although we bake our identity into our knives in a sense of humor, we're going to be giving away a couple of them. So if you make orders in the pre-order, which includes the subdued shirt or the inverted shirt, um, those will include entries. We're kind of following in finance and maneuvers example. Uh, every $5 spent on those kind of things goes towards the giveaway, and then we're going to be including some other ways, whether it's signing up for our new email chain or interacting with us in social media. But that being the case, let's just jump right into it now. Let's get started. Business
Cool.
handled. So Chris, it's been a little while since you've been on the show. Not too terribly long, but
Yeah.
it's been a little bit. And I wanted to give you a moment to see like what's changed since then. I think it's been a couple months. Like, how was the winter for you?
Dude, winter, I mean, living in Arizona, winter's great here, right? Like the weather, like we just turned on our AC like 3 days ago, unfortunately. But we are, middle of May, so I'll take it. Winter's been good, man. Just been since I was on last. Let's see here. I guess it has been a minute, huh? Since I was on last, I've been to Thailand. I have been to Switzerland. I've been to like 8 states, 40 different flights, like just all over, man. So things are going great.
Jeez, Thailand and Switzerland. Two countries that I have not yet been to. So
On polar opposite ends, man.
very much so. You
Yeah.
have the well armed Switzerland with all of its banks and its guns. Again, so like the Swiss make some of my favorite firearms. I've got an APC 9K that I've really enjoyed for a while. I
Just beautiful.
just recently put a Lingle lower on it, Lingle.
Huh.
Uh, it's an aluminum lower that takes AR trigger group,
Huh.
but for magazines, it takes the CZ Scorpion ones. Which of
Cool.
like, I think I think the best part of the CZ Scorpion is its magazines. You can get rid of everything else, but the magazines are solid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
cool.
I'm trying that out right now. I'm going to be working on that for a little bit, but I think that really stepped up the game of the APC, which is already a well performing product.
Yeah.
So that's the Swiss. Now I don't know if I have anything from. Well, no, I definitely have plenty of things from Thailand. It's marked. I just don't know what it is. It's probably textiles at this point.
Right? Yeah. Great country, dude. Thailand's great. Both Switzerland and Thailand. Polar opposites, and the people are great, man. It was a good time. So,
Good, good.
yeah.
Well, the topic of late that's been pretty heavy on this channel, but also I think is becoming more and more relevant to the United States is this idea of decentralization.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have a conversation with you on it because it in some ways it can become a little thick in the weeds as far as like what people are talking about, or it can or the conversation on decentralization can become a little bit focused on like this purely political aspect, like it's just another thing that people say.
Yeah.
But when I think of decentralization, you have to look at just the structure of the government of the United States is the closest, most natural thing of decentralization would be moving away from federal power towards states and even local localities having more, as they say, skin in the game and direct interaction with the problems at hand. And I wanted to hear, like as you've been able to travel to these different governments, how have you, or these different countries, have you had any interaction or observation on how they treat certain things that we would consider human rights in that perspective?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, when I think of decentralization too, like we'll back up a little bit and use the government thing as a an example. So my first outside the country travel when I was 17 was China, right? Um,
Ooh,
Backpack China for 2 weeks, most incredible experience of my life. And getting into decentralization, as soon as I say China, a lot of people are like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" Like, dude, they hate us there, yada yada yada. And it's let's be real clear, the government is the issue. From there, though, decentralizing everything, like the people are great, the towns are great, the cities are great. Like getting that example kind of in there, I guess, is one part of it. But same thing with Thailand, right? Like the Thai government can be a little oppressive, um, but local cities, villages, areas, regions of the country, people are on their own, building communities, doing what they do, enforcing their local economy or politics, right? So like even in just those examples in like a third world country all the way to examples of us, right? Like one thing I've seen is as far as decentralization with politics and our government, especially with the gun stuff going on right now, like with pistol braces and things of that sort. I think a lot of people are leaning into the decentralizing of power because they're like, dude, those guys in Washington are making all these rules that for 10 years have been good, not good, good, not good, and then a gray area. And like, it seems like local governments, Mark Lamb being a great example here in Pinal County, is fighting against that stuff. And that's him decentralizing power from the federal government, bringing it back to the local government. And did you see the Moonlight Industries thing yesterday? Do you know who they are?
I just saw it this morning
Yeah.
where I only saw the 1 minute clip
Yep.
where there's the two ATF agents that are talking to him, or at least people who are purported to be ATF agents, and he's saying something like, admittedly, I was looking at that video going, that background looks kind of familiar.
Yeah. Yeah. He's
So,
like a block that way from me.
oh no,
Yeah. He's literally like 2 blocks that way. So,
no.
which is
So,
okay because
yeah.
he's in Pinal County.
Yeah. Give an explanation of, because I'm assuming that the only thing that I've seen is the 1 minute clip. Are you able to give any more context on exactly what happened?
Yeah, so I reached out to him last night and was just like, "Hey, saw the video. Hope everything's good. My hand's raised. If you need help with something, just let me know." And I've never met the guy. We just exchange on Instagram and stuff, and I just know that he lives that way. Um, so if you haven't seen the video, guys, Moonlight Industries, he makes a lot of nylon gear, specifically low profile, kind of wrecky, just what's the word? Low profile kit, I guess, right? Um,
So
there-
like chest
yep,
rigs instead of less overt gear, stuff that gets worn under a jacket, that kind of stuff.
yep, yeah. Under a jacket, under a shirt, 2 to 3 mags instead of a whole 12 mag infantry loadout, right? Like small, purpose driven stuff. So it appears that ATF showed up at his door asking about the forced reset triggers or the binary triggers from Franklin Armory. They were in some hot water because ATF is doing ATF things like a year ago. Said that those are fully auto or close enough to where they would go after it. Anyways, ATF shows up at Moonlight Industries door asking about a FRT trigger. And he was super good. And he's like, I'm not going to answer any questions. He's like, I know you guys are doing your job, but you guys cannot make law. And the female ATF agent is like, well, I can't. And he's like, no, the ATF can't. This has not been voted in. He says everything very good. And he is very respectful, which I think is a key point to that video. You can stand up and be bold and courageous, but you don't have to be disrespectful. And I think there is a fine line with that. Because I think him being respectful in the video only helps our cause,
Yeah.
right? If he were to be the chest beaten, F you, F the ATF, yada, 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 it doesn't look so hot, right?
Well,
Now,
yeah, very much so.
if it has to come to that, it comes to that. But he respectfully is like, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to answer any of your questions. And, I'll get I think he says at some point he alludes to like, I'll get a lawyer if we need to talk further, but I'm done talking. And he just kind of shuts them down and they don't really have anything that they can say. The weird thing is did you notice the male doesn't say a word?
Yeah,
And
he's definitely posturing. He's definitely posturing, and so it's like,
yep.
yeah.
Yeah, the male ATF agent posturing. And did you see he's not carrying outside the waistband either?
I didn't. I noticed a frank lack of, like, I did not observe an obvious firearm.
Yep.
Yeah,
She has one on her hip.
yeah,
He's appendix carrying one. You can see it.
yeah. I wasn't like, I guess I wasn't like doing a detailed like observation of like some fucking Jason Bourne analysis of who has what,
Oh,
but it
which that's
but
not
it,
what I was getting at. I was just interested if they were badged agents that could legally carry a firearm or if they're civilian contracted people doing this work because those are two
oh,
separate things.
that's a really scary point.
So that's why I looked at it because I don't see a badge on his waistband and I'll have to go back. But on her waistband, there's a badge and a gun outside the waistband.
Yeah, no,
So
that
that's why I looked because I've been involved in ATF audits where there's not a badged agent there doing the audit. They are civilian contractors.
which is interesting. Oh, God, so I have not owned a gun shop. I have not
Yeah,
owned an FFL. So I have had minimal interaction with the ATF. Like whether or not I worked at one for a while, but I skipped that entire time, kind of thing.
sure.
Um, but so interaction with the ATF has been very limited for me, thankfully. right?
Oh,
Part
thankfully.
of it is because I've just never really been in an environment where it was necessary, right? It was
Sure.
just so I think many of us go about most of our lives without having any meaningful interaction with somebody who works there, which is kind of the way it should be, right? Unless you have some reason to expect it, you shouldn't. But now everyone expects it, which is a little bit different. I did not know that there were civilian contracted people, I guess, that worked for the ATF in that capacity.
Yep.
And I and
Just
I
checking. The last audit I did is 2 civilian contracted. They had a badge, no gun, no arresting authority at all. But they were there doing the audit. So they're going through paperwork, double checking for any mistakes or anything that doesn't quite add up. The problem I have with that is like, how do we know consistently people are getting the training they should? And humans have inherent bias. Like, the gun store owner was very nice to her, to this unbadged, civilian contractor agent person, to the point where he was too nice. And I'm like, hey man, give them what they asked for and no more. And he's like, no,
yeah,
she's super cool, bro. And I'm like, hey dude, stop right now. Only give what they asked for. That
yes,
is it. Like, you trying to help and be buddy buddy, as much as we would all like to think that that is going to lead to you maybe getting some help if there is a mistake, it they don't care, dude. Like, they don't care about your living, they don't care about your freedom. They're simple. The ATF's job is one thing: to put law-abiding Americans in prison. That's it, full stop. So, like, to see this back full circle now, to see the Moonlight Industries thing, especially when a lot of us are like, I'm in the camp where, oh, like, you can go out, like, you'll never meet an ATF agent. Like, it's very rare. I've shot all over the country. In fact, I've shot guns all over the world at this point. Like, I've never run into an ATF agent at the range. Now having it in our neighborhood with a local business who makes soft goods for special operations units plural, and have ATF guys show up at his door, dude. Yesterday was a little weird, man.
yeah, I would believe it. I thought I no, there's two things that I wanted to jump in on this one. One of them was I thought I heard somewhere in the in that short video, someone, I don't remember who it was, but I remember seeing something like, "Yeah, we're just going door to door looking for these things." Or I heard like a door to door. The word door to door was brought up, and I was like, "Well, that's a little shady." And I don't. It could have been the fellow who was recording, the guy who runs Moonlight Industries. Like,
Yeah.
are you going door to door looking for these things, kind of thing, or like, why are you here, kind of a bit. Um, but it also it could have been that I again I don't remember. It was the
Huh.
morning, so but I got this impression that they were looking for them. And the question that the very next question I would ask is, why did you show up at his door? Like, what trail of information was passed? And
Yeah.
that's that because I have two main thoughts on it. One of them is going to be, one's a statement, one's a question. And the statement of it would be, the delivery of the character in the video was well done,
Yes.
and and I think he needs to be commended for it,
Yep.
because we do need good examples of people who can hold their nerves together when they're under that kind of pressure. And it may not sound like a lot of pressure, and it may, yeah, sure, he's not being shot at, fine, right? But the reality of the case is that he's now standing there recording something, knowing he's recording it for people who are essentially not revealing the amount of information that they've gathered on him,
Yep.
potentially accusing him of owning a tool that they're claiming that is, next to a felony. And so it's not, it's there's a lot, and a lot of the stress comes in the mystery of it, right? I think most of us who are gun, like most of us in gun culture, I mean, so, I don't have a binary trigger. I really don't.
Yeah. Not
But
my thing.
it's, well, it does. I guess in some sense, it's kind of like, I've never had one. I've never had. It doesn't matter. We're getting past like the forced reset
Yeah.
trigger. If
Yeah.
I don't have a dedicated build that would make it reasonable. Like a Hilux, I need to get a Hilux before I get a forced reset trigger.
Yeah.
Uh, but the but the thing about it too is if I had one, it would still probably be something considered rather banal in a pile of parts in the back room where the guns are, right?
Yep.
It wouldn't be, it's not something that I would put in like my in air quotes duty carbine at
Yeah.
all. It's something that I would put in like a fun gun
Yep.
kind of thing, right? And
100%.
so now you got someone knocking on your door who's saying, "We think you have one of these and it's bad and we don't have the context of the conversation, but it's like, are you threatening to arrest me? Are you threatening to search my house? Is this going to be like what, what else is going on?" And by the way, we're once again back in that weird kind of gray area when it comes to braces versus stocks versus this. So, who knows what else you're going to find in my house? And the one rule about the ATF is you never let them in. So he has to be commended. Like he has to be commended
Yep.
for being able to hold a cool, calm demeanor, because that's something that just shows like discipline, not
Yeah.
just discipline in the Jocko Willing fashion, but I think that's the right answer. Is remember that we are on the right side here when it comes to this thing, and then being able to hold your composure shows an element of mastery over it, and I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah.
um
And confidence, right? I mean, if that video popped up without any context and it just starts off with people yelling, like you get off, forget the ATF, get off, da 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 da. I'd be like, dude, what did this guy? Part of me, part of me, would be like, man, what did this guy do to piss off the ATF? The other
yes.
part of me is like, fuck the ATF. I don't give a fuck, right? But
Yeah.
to see calm, collected, cool, good manner of speaking, he's very like just matter of fact but respectful. Like you're right, he does need to be commended. So I also
Yeah.
saw Papa Grand Thumb reposted that video, which is
Good.
huge,
Good for him. Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Grant Thumb still does good in this world, even though he's retired now. He's not, now that he's retired from the military, he can still do something good.
yeah, yeah, he earned the
I'm
retirement too.
I'm being sarcastic as
No,
if
I
like
know, I know.
he's oh he's punching up. Like, well, technically I've seen Grant Thumb, I'm punching down.
Yeah, or just punching equally.
Yeah. No, I'm making a joke as in like a height joke.
Oh
Uh
yeah.
it's sarcasm. It's really bad. No, I think Grant Thumb's worthy of being respected. But the next thing, that the other point that I had, and I wanted to hear, and it's more of a question, is
Yeah,
one of the biggest advantages that video produced now is now we have faces. Right now, the term doxing gets thrown around quite a bit, and doxing, whether it comes from people doxing admin results, which was, I think it was a self-correcting error. Like, oh, you participated in doxing, yeah, you're not welcome here anymore, right? You're not really welcome in gun culture anymore. It's not because of whatever else. It's just because you've shown that you're not trustworthy. Um, and so I think that's a good example. But now the question comes about, well, what about government officials? And I mean government officials like ATF agents. And I don't think of it as doxing necessarily. And let me be clear in this one. Do you think that it would be ethical or unethical for a list to be published state by state of all of the ATF agents operating in that area that only includes this amount of information: name, position, face? No addresses, no family, no affiliations whatsoever, but name, position, area of operation, face. So like you do Minneapolis, Tim Horton, the guy who makes coffee. This is his face, this is his position. He is a supervisor of tobacco only. Like, okay, cool. I'm not really worried about that guy. But you know
yeah,
what I mean? So that and have that as a distributable resource that doesn't go so far as to create the criminality of fully undoxing people,
yeah,
but remember, they are a public servant. So shouldn't the government be required to publish these things in a reasonable fashion? Because now one of the things that Moonlight did for all of us, is, or at least people in Arizona, is now they have two faces.
yeah,
Hey, I recognize you from that video. Yeah, you can't come into the house.
Yeah.
But thanks for visiting. Bye.
Yeah. It would legitimately just end there for me. Like they're walking up my driveway. Oh, I've seen you two in that video. Contact my lawyer.
Yeah,
Door shut.
exactly. Like,
Uh,
bye.
yeah. Like, and again, like they have no reason, they have no warrant. Da 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 da. Da. Because here's my answer to that. You bring up a good point for us. I think it is ethical, and here's the reason why. FRTs break no law in the books. They raided Franklin Armory and got all the documents for those that were produced.
Yep.
That's how people think that they've traced where owners of those are. Or the even scarier thing, which it's probably a healthy mixture of both, is they went through credit card records and just searched FRT, and they're just contacting people whose credit card has been swiped for that product, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So if they're able to get that information from us, and we're not public servants, they are public servants. I agree that there should be. I think there should be lists, and it'd be a short list. There's only 14 to 1,700 badged agents in the country.
Yes.
So, like, I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that. In fact, like, is there a petition we can sign for that? Because that's a really good idea.
It might
Like,
have to. It might have to be a crowdsourced project. To be honest, I think
yeah,
it might actually have to be like a state by state volunteers to participate and figure it out. And because
huh?
I mean, at least it might have to come from the bottom up and the top down at the same time. And the bottom up would be, as you participate in your community, it would be good information to have that. However, and this is what I mean by however, or this is why I'm going to include a however, like, um, it will require a person of noble character to address this situation.
Yeah.
And so, and that's why I'm saying it is that this isn't this. It will require somebody of noble character, of good character, to consider exactly what they're doing. Because once again, you're dealing with a thing that we believe in certain rights. We believe in certain principles as well. One of them is innocent until proven guilty, and we do not believe in guilt by association. At least most of us do. And so, although there is a voluntary aspect to working for the ATF, and although there is a choice to go participate in that economy, let's just call it an economy,
Yep.
although there is a voluntary aspect of it, we do not ascribe to that mentality that so drives belligerents and fools to accuse the individual for the actions of the whole. Now, you may bear some responsibility if you're in a riot or something like that, but that's why I'm saying it requires somebody of noble character to be able to say, okay, going back to the Minnesota example, this is Tim Horton. I know it's a Canadian coffee shop, but it's a joke, because Minnesota is basically Canada.
Yep.
um one of two states in the country that's trying to legalize pedophilia. Oops. But the you have just, we know who they are now. I know it is, so, like, okay, that guy, I know who that guy is. And all it is I know who you are. You don't you do not want to be the person who makes the scene, right? Because in
Yeah.
many ways, in many ways, we are fighting an asymmetrical conflict when it comes to media. And I think this is one of the few cases where the term asymmetrical isn't just purely some two-star general trying to get his third star. But what I
Yeah.
mean by asymmetrical is that when we are very aware of, or we are becoming, or we have, like, 2020 and so forth has made the world, made many Americans quite aware that it isn't an equal playing field. That if you make a big scene about it, you're the bad guy. But if they burn down a building, well, that's just the voice of the unheard. And so it requires a certain amount of wisdom. And if you're not willing to carry that weight, if you're not willing to carry that weight of responsibility, then you're not going to be able to participate meaningfully in this environment.
Sure.
And so, instead of sorting out people within our own community to be less and less participant, I think it's good that we build each other up to being more and more wise in our engagement with the world around us. And that's just kind of how it has to come down to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think we could look at getting some people together and doing and maybe it has to be a one part grassroots project and one part government down. So And I think I have more influence. I have more, not influence. I have more access to the grassroots side right
Yeah.
now. So yeah,
Well, and an interesting thing too, and we're really getting to the weeds here. Last thing, and then we can move on. Firearms legal protection, the lawyers that fight for our gun rights. That's someone we should contact about this.
that's a good point. Are you? Let's see. Are you talking about any group specifically, or just those?
No, like FLP, they go to bat for gun ownership, and as soon as laws are proposed that are infringements on our rights, they the next day throw in a lawsuit against it, right? Um, and those would be dudes that would know the legality of all this too. And dude, even if they did a free webinar where it's like, hey, here's the Moonlight video. If this happens to you, here's what you should say and do, and leave it at that. On top of having them check into if legally we could get a list of those agents.
Sure.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
I just, I'm FLP is doing great things. I had a buddy get in some issues recently with the ATF, nothing big. And FLP stepped in, told him what to say. Things been dropped. Everything's good. So,
Yeah, as far as legality goes, I tend to be a little bit reticent when it comes to just relying entirely on the will of lawyers.
yeah.
Now, let me to be clear, it's not that they're not they're, it's not that they're obsolete. It's that let's take the example of um it's you kind of need to recognize the limits of legality within a social environment. Like the law only goes so far as people are willing to obey it, kind of thing.
Sure.
And a case in point would be example. I know Orion Training Group was talking about trying to create some sort of some fund that is essentially like a pool of resources that people who are involved in self-defense cases can have access to
Yeah.
for the purpose of defending themselves in a legal battle. And he was continuously informed by law practitioners that you can't do that because that would be illegal, because you would be essentially seen as funding crime. And this is my interpretation of it, and
Yeah.
mind you. So you'd effectively be seen as funding crime, and like it's interesting that that goes because it makes sense, right? If you take a dishonest actor and you go commit crimes, legitimately crimes, whether it's crimes against the state or crimes against humanity, and then you access a fund, you have access to a fund that will
Yeah.
basically pay for your legal defense. That is it smacks of organized crime. But the funny thing about it is we saw this exact thing going on in Minneapolis in 2020,
Yeah.
where the people who were burning down buildings, which by the way, Minneapolis has not recovered. And
Oh, hell no.
there's an argument to say that it may not recover. But 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 what essentially you had government officials, including the now vice president, petitioning for and paying for the defense fund of people who go commit crimes. And so maybe we can be wise about this and recognize, yeah, we won't be able to do that now in our current operation apparatus because of the asymmetrical aspect of this kind of ideological conflict, right? Whether you want to do right and left, the left can burn down buildings and be decentralized in their organization, but yet have centralized funding and support networks. Um, and they can do it for 2 years, but if the right, lo and behold, the right does anything once, i.e., January 6th, like that, now you're locking people up for for
Yeah.
effectively misdemeanors. And so I don't think this needs to be a subject that we just become jaded about, but understanding how to maneuver in that environment.
Yep.
And I do give credit to the American population is that we're not stupid. We're very naive, but we're not stupid.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. The way you do that as a charitable organization.
mhm.
Yep. It'd be a 501c3. Donations are accepted. And then what the charity does with that, there'd be ways around it. There's something called the Innocence Project, which gets wrongly convicted felons out of prison, which sadly happens a lot. It'd have to be something like that, you know. Anyways, new topic if you want to move on.
Oh, I don't feel like we have to move on, but I think
Okay,
this is this
okay.
is this has been a really good introduction because it's been a conversation that I've been wanting to have, but
Yeah,
I don't but I've been away for a little bit, so it's good to come back to it.
sure.
But yeah, yeah. So you've been able to travel a bit, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Um, you said Switzerland and Thailand.
Yep.
Okay, so let's do the one. I got how my understanding of Switzerland comes from a combination of history, studying history,
Uh-huh.
reading books like A Farewell to Arms, where we're talking about like basically World War I era,
Mm-hmm.
and a combination of different interjected subjects and commentary on the like. One of them though is that like in Switzerland everybody has a gun. Did you when you were there? Did you have any interaction and observation of that? Was there any sort of like distinct cultural difference that you saw?
Everyone has a gun. Like, like we were over there working with B&T, Bruger and Tomet, right?
Yep, yep. Great
You have an
people.
APC. They are the Swiss version of, like fine military grade, even better than military grade because we know what that means.
Yep.
Firearms and accessories, right? And so we were talking about that. So the area we were in, Thun, Switzerland, is their version of what we were told, like the Fort Bragg area. Okay. So you can imagine, like, dude, we're in this beautiful scene, Swiss Alps, we're in this beautiful town, and then all of a sudden you hear like four 240 Bravos get ripped off in the background. Do, 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 do. You hear an explosion. Boom. You hear a tank go off. Boom. And everyone's just walking around having coffee in these cafes like nothing is different because to them nothing is, right? Like this is every day for them. And even while we're filming there, like on this like terrace at B&T, you can hear it in the background, and it was really cool. So I asked, like, hey, how, like, is it really like what we hear that everyone has guns and everyone's pro gun? And everyone I asked that to said absolutely, without a doubt. So when you get out of the military, because they're conscript military, right? You can buy your rifle from the Swiss military and they convert it to semi-auto and they send it home with you.
Ooh,
Bless you. They'll
thank you.
send you home with your rifle and a can of ammo. You're required to qualify twice a year with your rifle to keep it. And most of the guys there are legitimate like shooters and collectors. So like Carl Bruger,
Hmm.
obviously being who he is, he had a legitimate World War II OSS well rod, which I don't know if you know what that is. It's the most quiet pistol ever made.
Yes, I think so.
It was you could disassemble it and they would carry it in their pockets and say like if they got stopped by Nazis that it was a bike pump because it looks like a bike pump.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's there's a movie that uses it. It wasn't was it Munich?
I never saw Munich, so I'm spacing on where it's used. But yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So like
Yeah.
they would have all the guys there would have similar stuff like that all the way to modern day firearms. And so yeah, in my experience, everyone had guns over there. And it's the safest, cleanest, nicest country you could ever go to, man. It was awesome. Beautiful, beautiful country. And like
Yeah.
guns there, dude, like just I mean, we were walking around filming, and like on the channel, for people that aren't familiar, I wear combat pants like every time I shoot. It's just what I do. It's kind of like part of the little persona that is made from the channel.
Part of the bit.
Yeah, it's kind of part of the bit. It's funny because we all know that tactical asshole, and I am that guy. But we're walking around Switzerland, like, and I'm wearing combat pants. We're in this beautiful, picturesque, like cobblestone walkway, and people are just walking around like it's just normal, man. Like the military personnel there kind of walking around normal in everyday society. People with guns are like, it just is normal, man. It's very, very cool.
Um it's not I keep thinking of a song that keeps playing in the back of my head. It's by Grieg, but he was Norwegian. He wasn't Swiss. So,
Mm-hmm.
but he was a romantic era composer. Everyone knows, like everyone's heard his music because it's that do 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 do
Oh
do
yeah,
do. And I'm just thinking like, ah, da, da, ah,
that's how it was.
just having
Yeah,
a good time, seeing the mountains, the rivers, the rivers of chocolat. although that's
Yep.
French. Yeah, it's a little over the top. I'm sorry. But
No, it's we had Frank Sinatra, My Way, the song.
along, no, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I can look it up.
You've heard it. It's
Yeah.
been in a million movies, but for the trailer for that series of footage, we used that song and a bunch of footage of us like walking around the Swiss Alps, and then
Hmm.
cut to like machine gun fire, walking
So,
around a cobblestone town,
mhm.
machine gun fire. Like it was very much exactly how the trip was, because it's just a phenomenal country. Yeah, great place. I highly recommend it.
So, what is? Do you know? Are you familiar with the governmental organization of Switzerland right now? As far as
Zero.
like, neither do I. I have an idea of it, but I feel like I don't want to speak authoritatively on it because it's like I know they function. I mean, they have to have some sort of kind of central, very hierarchical or very hierarchical, centralized government because you have conscripted military,
Yep.
but there's something else about it, and it's an interesting thing too because Switzerland, the population of Switzerland is not like purely Swiss, right?
From my understanding, it almost is like it is
Oh,
very hard to become a Swiss citizen.
but
So
I guess I mean like ethnically, right? So if you look at Japan, it's like
Mhm.
99% Japanese,
Yeah,
like Japanese.
yeah,
And then you look at Sweden. Up until they were starting to engage in immigration, it was very, very Swedish. Whereas the United States doesn't really have that,
no,
right?
yeah.
Plus, for
Switzerland
a
is very Swiss.
okay, it's very
Yeah.
Swiss. Okay,
Oh
because
yeah.
I was wondering if it was going to be able. I was wondering if it was going to be able to become an example of effective multiculturalism, but it seems like that's just not the case.
No, in fact, not in a negative way, but I kind of got the impression that it's like, well, we only want you to, like, say you were to immigrate there, right?
Yeah.
Like I heard, and I might have misunderstood it, but you have to be making at least like 70, 80,000 a year or something like that. Like clean, criminal history. Like they have a bunch of criteria for you to be a part of the Swiss culture. Um, One of the guys that was working with us there is a American, Green Beret, actually, a little bit older guy who's now retired, but he's been living there full time for like 15, 20 years now in Switzerland. And it's rare because they don't afford that to everyone, but because he's working with B&T, I think his military career, it made it a little easier. But I
Yeah.
think they are very much Swiss and want to keep it that way because Sweden's a great example. Have you ever been to Sweden?
No, I'm very Swedish, but I've never been to Sweden.
Another great country. Like it is the people, the food, the scenery. Sweden's a phenomenal country. But when they started having kind of open border policy, our friend that lives there, she was like, I was all for it. I said, come to Sweden. We have chocolate. We have coffee. We will love you.
Hmm.
Dude, 6 months into it, her tune flipped. Crime
Uh,
skyrocketed. Rape skyrocketed. There's whole little like communities in her town, Malmo, Sweden, which is just across from Copenhagen, Denmark. It's
okay.
southern Sweden. Um, she's like, there's whole little pockets of the town that firefighters and police can't go into because they're not allowed. And like 2 days after we left, a block from our hotel in one of these little areas, some guy broke Muslim law. They trapped him in his car, poured gas on it, and lit it on fire, and did not allow the firefighters to get in to put it out. This was like 2 days after we left, and like,
Yeah. Yeah.
dude,
That really starts breaking down the convenient like myth of multiculturalism, right? It's like, and I get it. It's interesting too. Like as a subject, the idea of being multicultural, it appeals to our maybe our better graces, right? It's like, well, we most people understand. I don't even really know about most people, but when I think of multiculturalism, I think that the presentation is usually pretty straightforward. Like, I recognize that as a human being, I am fallible. I make mistakes. I am not omniscient. I don't know everything. And as I believe that what I as I understand that what I believe is genuine, I recognize that the beliefs of other people's can also be genuine.
sure,
But that doesn't mean that I can't understand things that are true. right? And so the challenge of multiculturalism in that one is in their environment, in the one environment, burning a guy to death in his car is perfectly acceptable because he broke Muslim law. You're right.
Correct.
So that is a heavy, but and that's and in that environment, that's in their milieu, in their social atmosphere, that's perfectly acceptable. But in mine, it's absolutely not. Maybe because you could consider that the Muslim version of lynching, or you could consider there's many different not allegories, but there's many ways that you could tie this to different things that we don't
Sure.
believe in. And that creates the great problem of like what multiculturalism looks like, because in one sense we have this kind of idea. I remember sitting in a cafe, uh listening to this guy on the other side of the room, because my wife and I were getting lunch. We were kind of traveling around the country looking for some stuff, but this guy was sitting on the other side, and he had moved to this town from California. He stated it. He's talking to his whatever, and he was very loud, and he was like he was loud enough that everyone on that floor of the room could hear everything that he was saying. And he continuously opined about how we just need to get along. We just need to get along. Why can't we just get along? And then immediately afterwards, he would dive into some disparaging comment about some group of people that he didn't like.
Of
And
course.
you're right, and it was this interesting moment because it kind of soured the town for us, which is tragic,
Yeah.
but it was the case. He would just go on, why can't we just get along? We just need to get along with our differences. But then he would be like, oh, and then these people shouldn't be allowed to buy property in our community. And you're like, I fit in that. I fit in that category,
Wow.
of being, a Christian or something like that. And it's just like, interesting. The iron law of woke projection never fails, kind of thing. And so, I know that that might be a little bit of a dig in that sense, but when we think about multiculturalism, especially when we even talk about it on, like, on a level of philosophy,
Yeah.
here's if we're talking about the philosophical foundation of multiculturalism, that's the problem. Is that what it ends up doing? Is it ends up flattening all of the participants to have no significance while creating an overarching principle. And
Sure.
essentially is, I allow you to practice the physical aesthetic of your religion, but you really have to ascribe to mine. And mine is this sort of new neo universalist approach.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work. It just doesn't work. The problem being, like, it's not separation of church and state, but it would be freedom of religion. Well, not all religions are free to practice in the United States. Let's just be very clear. If you're into the pygmy sacrifice of people, right, where your religion includes the practice of capturing belligerents and then sacrificing them to the heathen gods or whatever it is, we tend to say that's not okay in the United States.
Sure.
But
Sure.
some rule set says that. There's some rule set that determines that to be the case, and what informs that rule set is functionally a meta religion. So,
Yeah. Well, and
uh,
that's you know
go ahead.
that's the interesting thing, and this is what I talk about with friends. Much like you, I try to have friends from all walks of life. I think um, it is detrimental to your development as a human being and your growth and potential to just stay in a small ecosystem of people that you only agree with and that are like-minded. Now, obviously, that's going to happen, but I have left-leaning friends, right-leaning friends, libertarian, whatever, man. Atheist friends, Mormon friends, Christian friends. We got friends from all over. The difference is much like you said, like, and not harping on the Muslim religion. This is just what we're talking about now. I have great friends that are Muslim. In their culture, especially overseas, you have stuff like the Man Love Thursdays, right?
It changes in culture to culture for sure. We encountered it quite a bit in Afghanistan.
That's why I'm
Uh,
bringing it up, because like that is somewhat part of certain cultures there. And I've brought that up here to people like, well, that again, they don't see potentially anything wrong with that. We have issue with it, much like they don't see anything wrong with trapping a man in his car for breaking law and lighting him on fire, much like they wouldn't have a problem throwing a homosexual off a roof because he's a homosexual while still
Yeah.
engaging in the Man Love Thursdays, right? Like there,
Yeah.
it's
It w
so complex,
yeah.
but also
The
very simple at the same time. Like, hey, this culture is not going to fit with this culture, and to try to make it happen, like you're putting a square peg in a round hole, dude. Like
it has
certain
to be
things are just not going to mesh, man.
yeah,
You know,
it has to be somewhat voluntary and, it
give and
has to be
take on both ends.
even if there's no give and take, even if there's no give and take, it's that it only happens when people do it voluntarily. Like they do
Yes,
it by their own volition. Like I understand, and given the Muslim one was an interesting one because when I was in Afghanistan, I was talking to a fellow about some subjects just like that because it's not really any secret anymore. But at the time that I was in Afghanistan, and this is it's not just pertinent to me. I'm not the only like a testimony of this one, but we encountered two consistent things in Afghanistan is temporary like bouts of temporary homosexuality and bestiality. And the bestiality one is we don't do in the United States. But the point that I'm saying with that one is obviously that's not indicative of the entire Muslim population. Like
correct.
don't even begin with that line of talk. And
Yeah,
then the other thing about it too though was I was talking to this fellow and I would not identify him as like a chief theologian of the Muslim religion.
yeah.
You know what I mean? I would not consider him the Oxford version of Islam. But he was sort of a self-titled imam in the area, and he made this commentary that, well, we do these things. The people in this country do these things on Thursday because God can't see us. And it was like, I have a feeling that it's not a feeling, but like it was an interesting story too because that was the explanation. It was that like from like a moral compound he didn't he then he, I would make the argument that his fine. So what he is saying, what the moral argument he is making is that it's less important about doing the right thing and more important about not getting caught. And I thought that was the interesting part. It's
That's
like
what I took from that story.
exactly, and it's the same. You think about it this way, like um, there's an old Greek myth about the subject, and I can't remember the name of it, but it comes down to this one. When it comes to morality, um, if you could cheat on your wife and get away with it, and you knew with an absolute certainty that you would get away with it, would you still do it? That's a moral question, right?
Yeah,
And that's where morality lies. I know there's the old you're growing up as a kid saying um your character is what you do when people aren't looking, but it also comes down to, do I do the right thing because it is the right thing to do, or do I do the right thing because I don't want to get caught? And that is a heavy question to ask yourself. With
polar
that,
opposites. Yeah.
exactly. So let's wrap up part 1 of this episode. Go ahead and plug your stuff. Where can people find you? How do they get a hold of you? Where you
Yeah, for
guys
sure.
at these
So
days?
Instagram, just Chris Blau, CHRISBLAU, all lowercase, no spaces. My other company, 1911 Syndicate, Google it, Instagram, same handle. And then CGS Suppressors. They are CGS Group on Instagram. I travel the country with them doing suppressor demos. I'm going to Atlanta in a couple weeks for Atlanta Range Day. So if you're in that area, swing by and say what's up. But yeah, that's it, dude.
Cool. Well, that's part 1 for episode 80. So this would be 81 or 82? No, this is 82,
82.
isn't? This would be 82.
Yep.
82 with Chris Blau. Welcome back. And then we're gonna start part 2 here. It'll be available tomorrow morning. So
Sounds
with
good.
that being said, this has been the Redacted Culture Cast. Thank you for joining us. We will talk to you soon. Keep your hatchet sharp and your powder dry.